president's visits to Dayton, Ohio and El Paso, Texas today come as both cities, of course, are still reeling from the mass shootings, the back-to-back mass shootings in those communities. The country is also, I think it's fair to say, rattled. And as part of that, we are yet again having another national discussion about gun policy, about the prospects of gun reform and what gun reform could be and what we should dare to hope for in terms of those prospects and whether this might be another moment that might change it. But, you know, as scary and frustrating and emotional as this is for all of us in this country right now, this is a different moment entirely for people who have unwillingly and unexpectedly become sort of public figures on this issue because of their deeply personal loss from gun massacres in the past. Nicole Hockley lost her son Dylan in the Sandy Hook shooting that killed 25 other people, most of them little kids, nearly 7 years ago now. Ms. Hockley became the co-founder and managing director of Sandy Hook Promise, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to ending gun violence. And she joins us now here in studio. Nicole Hockley, thank you so much for making the trip here to see us. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think about you and the other Sandy Hook families whenever something like this happens, just because I know this is a different thing for you. It must be a different thing for you than it is even when the country is as rattled and upset and as emotional as they are by these back-to-back incidents.
Yeah.
Am I putting that on you, or do you think that's a fair way?
No, because there's an element of deja vu and a sense that here we go again. I'm experiencing the same trauma again, and then the same conversations happen, and we go through the same cycles, and you just wonder, when are we going to get through this to something positive on the other side? And it's exhausting.
Do you feel like these same conversations that we keep having, this sort of playing the tape, this recursive stuff that we keep going through as a country, is it helpful at all? I mean, we do have a choice about how we talk about these things in the wake of them. We do have a choice about what to focus on, about what to ask of elected officials, about what to talk to each other about. Is the conversation the wrong conversation, or is this just the one that we're stuck with?
I don't think it's the one. I think it's the one that people are choosing to be stuck with at the moment, because I think there are so many solutions and ways through out there, but people's ears aren't really open enough. Their minds aren't really open enough. It's just still stuck in the fight for gun control or gun freedom. And it's these partisan conversations that aren't moving forward, that are also scaring too many people to get engaged in the movement. Yet, the good thing about all these conversations is that they are reaching more and more people, and therefore more and more people are getting involved in this movement and demanding solutions from their communities as well as from their politicians.
I just spoke with the mayor of Dayton, Ohio, who said something very striking at the end of the interview. She just kind of said it parenthetically. She said, you know, we're the 250th city to have a mass shooting since January 1st this year. And knowing that you were going to be here tonight, it does make me think that one of the things that's happening is that the community of survivors grows every day, literally every day, people who have been touched by one of these incidents. And you do speak from a position of moral specificity and moral power because of your loss. But I wonder how you see that, if you feel like you're in a growing community or in a community that is able to sort of marshal its power and its resources for what you want it to be used for.
We're absolutely a community that's growing far too quickly than it should, and in a community that shouldn't exist in the first place. And I don't think we're that far away from a point in this country where anyone knows someone or has themselves been affected by gun violence. It's that dominant in our culture. It's that part of our everyday. I mean, I was reading an article today about bulletproof backpacks for school kids, and I'm like, when did back-to-school shopping become looking for bulletproof backpacks? This isn't the America that we should be providing.
Yeah.
And I think it's down to all of us to force the way through to these solutions.
Part of the idea, I think, in Sandy Hook Promise was the idea of getting past some of the jargon and some of the knee-jerk sort of dyads here where it's one thing or the other and nothing in between. Do you feel like over these 7 years that there have been any, at least points of discussion, if not points of advancement, where you feel like they have given you hope, they have made you feel like there is a constructive reason to keep talking to each other and keep trying? Absolutely.
On the policy front, we have seen progressive discussion on background checks and extreme risk protection orders. I'm waiting for the action to come from those talks. And there's bipartisan proposals in Congress right now. So when the president talks about pushing these things forward, these are actions that he can take and encourage both sides of the parties to take as well. But in addition to that, we all know that preventing gun violence isn't just about policy or limiting who has access to guns. It's also about pairing those real policies with community solutions like education on how to recognize the signs, then the willingness to stand up and say something, as well as the tools to report it. That's where we focus at Sandy Hook Promise, but you need both. You need legislation and you need community efforts as well, because we can look after each other.
You need that sort of commitment that it's worth looking at as a community in a sustained way. One other question for you, and again, not to get too into the weeds on any one specific policy, but I wonder if it has been heartening to you, or if you think it's been constructive to see, frankly, Democratic-controlled states try a bunch of new laws around gun reform. I mean, California passed background checks for ammunition.
Yep.
New York State passed a number of different laws, gun policy reforms after Newtown, after Sandy Hook, that they believe have made a difference in terms of New York State gun violence. Seeing, obviously, every state that does something, it sort of creates a loophole, because when there isn't a federal change, that means that you just cross state lines and you've escaped that new restriction. But is it helpful to have blue states sort of experimenting with what's practical and what might be effective?
Absolutely, because then we know what works and what doesn't, and also how we teach the communities about those laws so they know what to do. Like for extreme risk protection orders are in a lot of states at the moment, but if you don't know that that state law is available to you, or how to use it, or what signs to look for in the first place, then it's not as helpful. So that's why the training to go with the legislation is super important. But also it shows ways forward, and ways that are still constitutionally appropriate, that people can still be gun owners and engage in these policies as well and save lives. And it points to where there are incidences where someone can't get a gun in one state and commit a crime from a gun purchased in another state. Then it clearly shows where those gaps are.
It essentially creates a lot of pilot programs around the country for the federal government to consider what would be more meaningful change.
Good model.
Nicole Hockley, co-founder and managing director of Sandy Hook Promise. Again, I know you do not have to do this, and I really appreciate you being here in person in particular, but also being willing to talk about this stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, more news ahead. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.